Welcome to the show. It's Ivey Sports Talk up and rolling on a Thursday, or as I like to call it, another day to take crack shots at Lincoln Riley and USC. That's kind of the way the last couple of weeks have gone, especially this week as things have kind of heated up a little bit along those lines. He's Jesse Stiers. I'm Sean Stiers, and we are here for you today. I mean, we're here for you every day, but even more so today because it is we in, we out day. And we've had plenty of subscribers submit plenty of questions on the good old New Champions Lounge for us to answer today. Are you ready to dig into these, Jess?
I'm here for everyone but DK, and I am ready to dig into these questions.
All right. Have you had a chance to look at any of them?
No.
I think you're going to enjoy them. Scrolled through, looked at a few. Some good ones in there today. Let's start with this one. Ballpeen Shillelagh chiming in. He's got a trio, which is kind of his thing. He likes to go three. College football will somehow learn to incentivize playing good teams over winning against a bunch of subpar teams. In parentheses, making USC looking to drop Notre Dame rivalry look absolutely insane. In parentheses. We out on that.
I just have to be a big out on that one. I think that they're concerned about how these conferences look overall, how many teams they can get into the conferences, and what they can, the money to be made off of those games. Not every single game is going to be, a relevant, tough game. I don't mind, teams having some of these non-conference games, but don't put Montana State or South Dakota State. Like, you can beef it up, but you don't have to beef it up all the way that you're playing ranked opponents in your non-conference schedule. So I don't really see a need to incentivize it. I think a lot of these conferences are going to play hard enough schedules, and that's why you're going to see an expanded, playoff format, because these conferences are worried about getting teams in with already playing hard schedules during the regular season.
I'm a little bit more in just because of the fact, the Big Ten, more so the SEC. Like, the Big Ten wants to say that its conference schedules are tougher now, but they have really thinned it out to make sure that they are not, that their top teams really aren't playing each other that much outside of Ohio State and Michigan. We've looked at some of the schedules already. Penn State's got a cupcake schedule. Oregon's schedule is very manageable. And quite honestly, USC's schedule is pretty manageable. But the SEC and the Big Ten are talking about this. I don't know if they ever actually officially, have done it or not, but they've talked about this, future, like this joint scheduling thing where they're playing against each other every year. So at least to some extent, that's kind of the direction they're going. And I do agree with what you said, because of the fact that there's a 16-team college football playoff, as we've been talking about quite a bit. Like, you're going to see teams with multiple losses, 2 and 3 losses, are going to be the norm with a 16-team field, if that's what it ends up going to. That's going to be the norm in terms of getting into the playoffs. So, I think to some extent there is, I don't know that there's necessarily incentive, but they're also not de-incentivizing, I guess, playing, tougher out of conference opponents, because of the fact that again, and especially if the Big Ten and the SEC each end up with the auto bids, if they're going to be guaranteed 4, I mean, there's, you're going to be in good shape. You can take a non-conference loss, and as long as you're one of the top teams in your conference, you're still going to have a chance to make it to the playoff at the end of the season, non-conference loss or not. And a good non-conference win obviously helps you.
Yeah, but I think that Michigan's national championship 2 years ago just proved that there's no incentivization.
Well, right, but again, I mean, that's when it was still a 4-team field, so like we went to 12 last year, now we go to 16. It feels like it's at least sliding a little bit the other way, but I get your point, like with that specifically about Michigan, because that was a cupcake schedule too. Another one from Ballpeen. This year's perfect petty revenge tour would be meeting USC, LSU, and Ohio State in the playoffs to win the national championship. In or out on that?
Yeah, I'd be in on that. I think the only other school that you could maybe sub in and out is Michigan. But, to be honest with you, yes, it would be petty, but it'd also be very stressful because you wouldn't want to lose round 1 to Lincoln Riley after talking crap all year. And losing Chad Bowden, obviously. You definitely wouldn't want to lose to LSU after everyone's favorite punching bag is Brian Kelly, even though, he did win a lot of football games at Notre Dame. And, of course, Ohio State, because they've beaten you like 3-4 years in a row now, and obviously one of them was a national championship. So it's the perfect list. It would just be very stressful.
Yeah, I would add. Yeah, see, I agree with what Josh is saying. Play USC twice. I would actually say take USC off and put Michigan on. Go Michigan, LSU, Ohio State. Like for one, USC being on this list would mean they're in the playoff, right? So I guess it would matter more because you would beat them in a significant game. You could argue the most significant game in, for like most significant head-to-head meeting between the two, possibly ever, considering it would be in a college football playoff game, even though they've obviously both met. Like Notre Dame has visited the Coliseum plenty of times, including last year with a college football playoff on the berth on the line. But Craig D says, and beat them twice. That's true too. You know what? I guess when I think about everything that's going on right now, I would say, yeah, USC probably needs to be on this list with all this acrimony going on with, is the series going to continue in the whole thing? I agree, Ballpeen. I've come around in a very short amount of time on this one. It would be nice to see Notre Dame beat them twice. Christopher sums it up plain and simple. Lincoln Riley is scared. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. It has just not stopped raining all day here.
Yeah, well, that's what yesterday or the last 2 days were like here. It actually did stop today after it rained 2 straight days. It was like we were living in frickin' Seattle or something. DK coming hard at you.
Man.
Said that you and your generation just want to hand out participation trophies.
Maybe my generation, but I'm not one of those people.
Yeah, Jesse's not a participation trophy guy. He actually competed when he played sports. So
someone's got to win and someone's got to lose.
That's right. Actually, I remember. Now this was me, so it wasn't you making the decision. I don't even know if you remember this. The first year you played Pop Warner football, your team finished, I think, second. You went to the championship, had a great regular season, went to the championship game, lost the championship game, right? The Bears. Right. Second season, completely different coaching staff, different set of players. I think did you guys win one game?
The unfortunate part is we won 0 games, I'm pretty sure. And I was like, they did a draft. It was like a Pop Warner draft. And I was the first pick for this team. And there was this other team called like the Gators. And they literally had everyone on, like Shaq was on that team. Right. Zach Lytle was on that team. There was like Luther was on that. I was like, literally that team had to be handpicked. And then there was this other team with me.
But somehow there was a draft and yeah, right. Like all those players would just end up on that one team if it wasn't rigged, right?
Right.
Well, that year, your second year, after you guys finished second in the Pop Warner League, your first year, your second year, the team was horrible. And end of year, one of the moms calls me. She's like calling all the parents, of players on the team. And she said, I just, I wanted to see if you would want to go in and give us a little money so that we can buy trophies for the players to remember this season. And I said, no, I think I'm going to take a pass on that. Appreciate you calling, though. We'll talk to you later. Because I mean, that literally a participation trophy is what she wanted. You want a trophy to remember. I mean, were they literally going to put like 0-8 on the trophy? Is that what they were going to inscribe? Are you kidding me?
They're going to put 0-8, but 8-0 in our hearts.
Right. She was very nice about it, though.
Hopefully you were too.
I was just like, yeah, no, we're going to pass on that.
Appreciate it.
She was a little stunned. She was stunned that I said no. I wonder how many parents actually gave money to buy their kids trophies.
Did we get a
winless team?
I don't even remember the trophy.
You didn't get a trophy because I didn't give the money. No,
I got it. So you only got it if your parents gave a little bit. Okay.
Right. That trophy would not have come in our house. You can rest assured on that.
I do remember our Memorial Day championship trophy. That's always this. Speaking of Memorial Day, that was my favorite Little League tournament. Was that Memorial Day tournament? I think for obvious reasons, it was my favorite because I hit my first home run ever during that tournament, and me and my friend went back-to-back in extra innings to win the championship.
Yep, I remember that. That was quite a moment. I didn't realize we were going to waltz down every youth sport
avenue.
Memory lane.
We're still on we in, we out number 1.
I know. Ballpeen Shillelagh with this third question. In or out, 5 years from now, the Notre Dame wide receiver room and coaching will look like our current DB room and coaching, seeing a jump in recruiting and production led by the play of this year's team.
I just have to be out on this. Their wide receiver room needs a lot of work, and what their DB room has turned into, and it's specifically led by the coach. It would be kind of a disgrace to the hard work that the DB room has put in just to say the wide receiver room could do that in 5 years. Do I think really they haven't officially put their foot in the ground and gone towards that direction yet? Like that's what we think Jaden Greathouse and company is going to do this season. But they haven't even done that yet. I have to be out because I haven't any signs to be in yet.
You know what? I'm going to go in. I'm going to be the more optimistic one and get away from the doomsayers of you and Vince. And I'm going to go in on this. And I think in 5 years, once this homegrown quarterback play starts really showing what they can do, that's going to help. And I just think that the play of these guys, I'm not going to make any guarantees about what receivers catches and yards and, all these things are going to look like this year, but I just think it's going to look a lot different. The passing game is going to look so much different than what we've been used to seeing. And remember, we're talking about 5 years from now. We're not talking about tomorrow. We're not talking about at the end of one season or 2 seasons. We're talking about in 5 years. And so that would be going into year 9 for Marcus Freeman at that point. And I mean, most of the people on this board think that Notre Dame's going to win 2 or 3 national championships in that span. So wouldn't it stand to reason, if that's the case, that the wide receiver room looks a lot different as well? So yeah, I'm going to be in.
Speaking about quarterbacks, I wanted to sneak this in real quick. It keeps slipping me. Do you think Deuce Knight did his thing because of where CJ Carr basically is at right now?
I think some of it came into play. Like when he started looking at things, he didn't want to sit for 2 years.
I think he wanted it all to be his as soon as he got there.
Right. Exactly. And, because look, he started shopping himself is the way, that's the way it shook down. It wasn't necessarily, like Auburn came running at him. Obviously, he and Auburn came to whatever agreement, but he shopped himself first. And I do think that ultimately the prospect of him having to sit behind a guy for at least a couple of years was too much for him. And, he's still much more of a developmental guy than CJ Carr. Carr is I'm not saying Carr is a finished product, but he comes with much more polish. Yeah, exactly. Oh, on the same wavelength there. Yep. Yeah, I mean the money. I mean, but again, he shopped himself. Like what Craig is saying, that and the dollars. He shopped himself. He got a big load of money, and he found a situation where he could go and make some money, and also if he upholds his end of the deal, he'll have a chance to play sooner. Joe asks this question. USC is thinking that if they weaken their schedule like that of Michigan when they won their natty, that's the route to go to try to win one for themselves.
Yep.
But in the new playoff system, this will actually hurt them because by the time they get to the playoffs, the teams that are left are true competitors of the field, and they won't stack up against them, and they will be out in the first round. Are you in or are you out on that, Jesse?
Yeah, I'm in on this. I do think USC is trying to weaken their schedule, and I think Michigan has blazed the path towards a national championship, kind of provided a template of what you can get away with, cheating included, and weaker schedules included. And so, that blueprint is out there. And I do believe that if you want to be ready for the playoffs, you have to be battle tested and kind of prepared for the playoffs. You can't show up to the playoffs and not have played a playoff caliber type of game. You just can't flip that switch on. And especially if you're USC, where you've struggled in what I would say, like a playoff game would really hurt USC if they had not played a playoff type game, because they are weak in the trenches. And so it wouldn't be a good sight for their offensive and defensive line and skill position players to go up against some of these more explosive, bigger teams when they didn't have to do that in the regular season. Now, I'm not saying, load your schedule up, but at least test yourself once or twice in the regular season and see if I don't think it's a thing to just make the playoff anymore. Like you have to, with 16 teams.
Yeah, now with an expanded,
you got to win a game.
Exactly.
You got to win a game. It's no longer, we made it and that's good enough. You got to, with the top 16 teams in the country now, you got to win a game. It's
good enough at Indiana. It's good enough at Illinois. Those kind of places where they're not traditionally in the hunt for.
There's no expectations.
That's exactly right. It shouldn't be that way at USC, but honestly, the way USC is built right now, the way that Joe is spelling it out, that's absolutely the way it is. They want to dumb down their schedule as much as possible, come down to just a couple of tougher opponents if they can help it, because they know they're still not built to compete in the Big Ten yet. I mean, RJ Abadia, the guy from USC who we had on the show last week, has said that for the last couple of years. And if, most people are being honest out there, they're not. There's probably, I know there are some with more rose-colored glasses who think they're closer than that. But I mean, that's where they've got to get that thing put together, is offensive line, defensive line. That's what they've got to get figured out, because they've still got skill talent. They've got skill all over the field. Skill. They always do. They're always going to crank out NFL wide receivers and good quarterbacks and all that stuff. But can they be good enough, down in the trenches? No, they can't. And they want their schedule as soft as possible to try to get in. And they would be nothing more than what Indiana was last year, just fodder for a good team to beat them in the first round, and they'd be one and done. But they could say they made the playoff.
The best analogy I have is it would be like cheating on all the exams during the semester and then showing up to the final exam. You're like, oh, we're ready. We're here to take the exam.
Uh-huh. Good point by Brian on Deuce. He said he bailed after that camp that he was at with Leonard and Carr when they all went down to Alabama. Said he knew that he couldn't play. That's really good point, because he went down there and he saw what those guys were about, and he's like, wow, maybe I do have farther to go than I thought, because it wasn't long after that. Excuse me. From Josh CSP 77, we in or we out? College Football Playoff Committee will end up voting on getting rid of the way the top 4 teams are seeded. Notre Dame goes undefeated, gets one of the top 4 seeds, but then the media and non-Notre Dame fans will be screaming once again they don't deserve it because they don't play in a conference. Well, they did get rid of the seeding formula today. So the other side of this, do you agree with the whole dissertation that Josh has made here?
So I'm going to assume they're going to go undefeated. I won't go in or out on that part. But in terms of screaming that they don't deserve it, 100%. That's always going to be the narrative around Notre Dame. I don't think Notre Dame can do anything outside of joining a conference, winning said conference, going undefeated, winning the conference championship for the national media to be like, you know what, they absolutely deserve it. Or they win a national championship in this independence route within the next 5 years. And I think a lot of that Notre Dame doesn't deserve it talk will go away. But until then, until they win a national championship while being an independent or join a conference, someone is always going to have something to say.
That's exactly right. But the beauty of that is none of that matters. People can, just, talk all the talk that they want, but as long as Notre Dame goes about doing their thing, what difference does it make? If they're going undefeated and getting a top 4 seed, which means a first round bye and everything else, who cares what everybody else says? Because it doesn't matter. It like, just look at earlier this week when we were talking about, someone was already saying, well, is the 16-team format, is that what's going to force Notre Dame into a conference? I mean,
Nope.
Run down the list of things that people think every time something happens, is this going to get Notre Dame into a conference? Will this force Notre Dame into a conference? No, it's not. And as long as Notre Dame stays independent, it doesn't matter what they do. There will always be people who are saying that, it's unfair. They should have to be like everybody else. And, when the bottom line is, like, if you compared USC and Notre Dame's schedules as an example, and you're talking about who's actually playing the tougher schedule, there's no doubt that it's Notre Dame that's playing a tougher schedule than what USC is playing. And USC is the one that wants out of it. So. Jake, we in or we out? If Notre Dame beats both Miami and Texas A&M by at least 2 touchdowns, and I could see it being worse, which I truly believe they will then jump into the top 2 in the rankings following the Texas A&M game. In or out on that?
I'll be in on that. Why not? I think that's a fun question. Both of those teams would be preseason ranked, I'm pretty sure. So to go 2-0, one of them on the road, one of them against probably I would anticipate going to be an even better Texas A&M team than last year, but thankfully you get to play that game at home. And you win handedly in both of those games. I do believe that they could potentially be a top 2 team in the country.
Did you know Texas and Ohio State opened the season against each other this year?
I feel like I did, but didn't.
I was just looking at what I anticipate is Texas and Penn State being 1-2 in the rankings. Texas and Ohio State play each other in week 1. So whoever wins that game is going to be most likely number 1. Ohio State will probably start a little bit lower because of the fact that they don't have a returning quarterback and all that stuff. Because like I've said, that it's the teams with the returning quarterbacks, and it's kind of an asterisk by Texas because of what everybody thinks of Arch Manning. But Penn State, we've talked about how easy their schedule is. Nevada, Florida International, and Villanova in the first 3 weeks. So nobody is going to pass Penn State with that schedule. Week 4, they play Oregon, so they'll kind of find out after that. But so those 2 games would be the first 3 weeks because there is a bye in between. I'm going to be out just because, again, I think the winner of that Texas-Ohio State game is going to have one of those top 2 spots, and I think Penn State is going to occupy one of those top 2. They'll probably be number 2 when the first polls come out, would be my guess, because everyone's on the Penn State hype train because they've got Drew Aller and a few other guys coming back. So I'm out just because I don't think that the teams in front of them would move. Now, I think Notre Dame could easily be, 3 or 4, but I don't think that they'll go to the top 2 just because of the teams that are probably going to start off in the top 2 and, kind of how those first few weeks are going to play out. But it's a good thought. Dome or Grizz, in or out, hiking in the mountains is a better vacation than sitting on a beach.
For me, vacation means doing nothing, and that includes physical activity. I like. Don't get me wrong. Our honeymoon is going to be basically half an all-inclusive place where we're literally going to do nothing, and then the other half is going to be going to France and, you know, doing more of the touristy walking around stuff, that's fine. But I got to start with the all-inclusive doing nothing before. Like, I wouldn't start it with just straight into backpacking through France, basically. Like,
So you're not going to answer this question, mountains or beach?
No, it's definitely beach.
Okay. So that's what you're saying is doing nothing, sitting on the beach.
Yeah. Hiking means you're walking. That's doing a lot of something.
That's exactly right. Like hiking I can do. Hiking in the mountains, that's a lot of work, man. And like you're going to call that vacation time? Like, sit on the beach, enjoy a nice beverage, let the waves, you know, serenade you, soak up the sun, the whole thing. Beach is way better than any mountain hiking. Guaranteed. Craig says Villanova plays football. They've actually got a really good, or they were, I think they won a national championship at the FCS level. I mean, it's been, gosh, how many, maybe 12 or so, 12, 15 years ago, something like that. You remember Matt Caesar, who played for the Cubs for a little bit, the outfielder? Yep. He played baseball and football for Villanova. He was like a big multi-threat. He was like a wide receiver and a kick returner and punt returner, and played baseball for Villanova, ended up making it to the major leagues with the Chicago Cubs. He was on that national championship team that they had. From Mr. Gilmore, ask Jeremiah Love to return some punts. I've heard some compare Love to Reggie Bush. Bush returned punts. He not only had some highlight reel punt returns, he was a psychological weapon, and some punters would shank trying to avoid kicking to him. So you in or out on Jeremiah Love as a punt returner?
This is a big out for me. He already has snap restrictions. He already has, I wouldn't call it snap restrictions, but, you know, usage. He's not just going to be out there. And so when you talk about one of the most dangerous plays in football, you know, especially just look what the NFL has done and at kickoff, kick return. I think punt return is up there. Could he be good at it? Of course. He's the most dynamic player on the field. Does that mean he needs to be doing it at the end of the day? No. And I wouldn't even ask him to do it just because his sole focus is running the ball and catching a couple passes out of the backfield. I don't need any more risk for, you know, what happened at the end of last season.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that they've at least, you know, like tried him out as a punt returner before. Punt returning and kick returning are two different things. I would be in on him as a kickoff returner. I don't think as much on punt return, just because, you know, again, it's like there's much more concern about, you know, like the gunners bearing down on you and finding the ball and all that kind of stuff. It's
head hunting.
Yeah, it's head hunting, and it's a different skill as well. So I'll be out on Love as a punt returner, like Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love as kickoff return guys. That'd be pretty exciting, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think Tommy just put a great one in there. Put Golden in there. Just put a young guy in there. A young guy, twitchy, a lot of speed, reckless abandon, doesn't care how they get on the field, looking to prove something. You know what I mean? That's the kind of guy that I want to return punts.
Right. First job of the punt return guy, though, is catch the ball. And that's what disqualifies a lot of guys, is the ability or inability to catch the ball. We in or we out. Chocolate-covered pretzels is a better combination than chocolate-covered peanut butter.
Out. Reese's is my favorite candy, and I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah, way out on that one. I'm ditto. Reese's is at the top of my list. Chocolate-covered pretzels, they're okay, but honestly, there's not enough chocolate in a chocolate-covered pretzel. That's why you just combine it with that delicious peanut butter, and you're ready to go.
Side note, though, my friend came over last night for the season finale of Survivor, and he's from Findlay, Ohio, or the whereabouts of that area. Mm-hmm. They have this great chocolate shop, and he did bring over chocolate-covered pretzels last night, and they were pretty solid. Fantastic. Yeah. I'm not saying I don't like them. I just like chocolate-covered peanut butter better.
If that's the option, yeah.
Yeah.
If USC isn't careful, they could be the next Nebraska, struggling to stay relevant in the Big Ten, and both ended their biggest rivalry. Oh, both ended their biggest rivalry, Notre Dame and Oklahoma. You in or out on that?
Yeah, I mean, I am in on this actually. I think it's a slippery slope, and USC is now treading in light water because you have Lincoln Riley and you had a Heisman winning quarterback, but you couldn't get it done. Now you're playing in a harder schedule. You don't have a Heisman quarterback, and Lincoln Riley is not as immortal as he used to be with NIL and the transfer portal. And so, if Lincoln Riley doesn't hit, and their track record of the last 20 years between just disasters at the head coaching position, at the athletic director position, I do think that they are on a slippery slope of just kind of heading back towards another college football program that used to be good.
I think it's a great analogy, and I hadn't thought about it because I mean Nebraska and Oklahoma used to play every year, obviously, and they were national powers for a long time through most of the 80s and 90s. And obviously Oklahoma was able to sustain that longer, but I think that Nebraska would have been able to continue. Like they still had some work to do to kind of, get back to sort of where they were, but they could be one of the bullies in the Big 12 because they weren't in the Big 10. And you didn't have to play all those Big 10 teams because those Big 10 teams are built differently, at the lines of scrimmage. And that's where Nebraska used to dominate, was with those big corn-fed linemen that they had. But yeah, they ended that rivalry with Oklahoma. They went for greener pastures in the Big 10, and it obviously has not worked out well. And, there used to be a pretty good rivalry that they had with Colorado in the 90s and as well, when Colorado was still a national power before that kind of fell off. But that was, that was obviously when Nebraska was also in the Big 12. So they honestly don't have a rival anymore. It's not Iowa, even though they're right next door to Iowa or Iowa State, So they're kind of dangling out there without a rival, and they've also become a very mediocre team in the Big Ten. So I'm completely in on that. Like I said, I think that's a great analogy that USC could very easily find itself, a decade from now, still trying to find its identity playing in this conference that they got themselves into by making this move. If this is the last time Notre Dame beats USC at home, after the game is over, the fans should throw toilet paper on the field to represent how soft Lincoln Riley and USC have become. In or out on that?
I'm out. I think it's a great idea. I think it's tremendously funny. But, as your parents tell you, you got to be the bigger person. You don't got to stoop to that pettiness, stand on your moral high ground.
Yeah, everyone knows it should be marshmallows, not toilet paper. But yeah, I'm not going to advocate throwing stuff out there on the field. So I'll be out on that one as well. But it is funny. I will say that. Jake, don't know if you're old enough to have watched The Rocket, but he put a level of fear in opposing teams when he returned punts that Reggie Bush didn't come close to. Is he the same one that was asking about? No, that was Andrew that was asking about returning punts. That's not really an in or out. It was more probably a follow-up to Gilmore, but I'm definitely in on that. I mean, you talk about fear. So, okay, where's Theismann's Heisman? Man, this is a long one. Let me see if I can get this. Let me see here.
I feel like this is a question that often comes up.
If the USC series ends, should Notre Dame renew a regional rivalry with one of the traditional Big Ten teams? Are you in or out renewing the rivalry with Michigan State or Purdue? He says, my concern is neither adds much to Notre Dame's strength of schedule ranking. Before Penn State joined the Big Ten, Notre Dame and Penn State used to play each other on a semi-regular basis. Could that be a better option? Notice I didn't mention Michigan. My thought is with Notre Dame's resurgence, Michigan would rather avoid putting another top team on their schedule. So the question is, if USC goes away, should Notre Dame renew a regional rivalry with a team like either Michigan State or Purdue? In or out on that?
I'm in on this, and I'll be kind of short and sweet. I think I would like to see basically a rotation between Michigan and Ohio State. And I think if you wanted to include Penn State in that mix, you could, but I don't think you need a 3-team rotation. I think you need 2. So just decide between Michigan, Penn State, and Ohio State, especially with how much Ohio State and Notre Dame have been playing in relevant games. And I think they're going to continue to play relevant games going forward in the playoffs as well. So I think Ohio State makes a lot of sense. And I think Michigan does well. And he kind of said it in this question. Michigan State and Purdue are concerns because, they're just, even though it's a trophy game, they're just not very good. And it just doesn't add much to your schedule competitively.
And that's exactly it. Well, it doesn't add much to your schedule competitively. You're already getting that with the teams that you're playing in the ACC, the majority of the teams that you're playing in the ACC, so that neither one of those 2 teams do anything for you. It would honestly probably make the fans of those other programs happier than it would make Notre Dame fans. But because the other part of this is not just from the competitive standpoint, but again, looking at it from a Notre Dame is independent. They are a national program. Well, if you're a national program and you just lost your most marquee national game every year that gets you to Los Angeles, doesn't do you a lot of good adding Michigan State or Purdue. Like I've said before, like Michigan makes more sense because it's going to bring a lot more eyeballs and, hype, excitement, energy, enthusiasm from both fan bases and from a national TV perspective. So even though Notre Dame and Michigan are just a little bit closer together than Notre Dame and Michigan State or Notre Dame and Purdue, about the same, I think it is to Purdue as Michigan. But, so even though the proximity is the same, Michigan is a national brand as well. That does a lot more from you or for you in a lot of other areas other than, just having, a team to fill a slot, so even though you're not traveling to the West Coast to play Michigan, that would do a lot because of the eyeball factor and the excitement factor of just having those games both in Ann Arbor and here in South Bend. And then, like I've said before, like if you're basically going to drop the level of your opponent, like to a Purdue, as an example, Michigan State maybe one or 2 steps higher on the rung, you're better off giving UCLA a call, because if you can schedule something with UCLA, at least, you're getting into the same market as USC. And, you think UCLA might want to stick it to SC a little bit by saying, hey, you guys can be scared of playing Notre Dame, but we're actually going to play them now that you're bowing out of this. UCLA is going to take it. I think that maybe there's something there where UCLA wouldn't mind kind of being a little, continue to be a thorn in the side of SC by playing Notre Dame if they accepted that. And then, Oregon and Washington are possibilities as well, because even though they don't get you to California, you're still West Coast. You get into, some big markets out there. And again, those are going to be marquee games. And I'm not saying that you play them every year, but like we've talked about, if you have kind of a revolving cast of opponents that still get you out to that part of the country, I think that that's what you need. You have to find some opponents that are going to get you on the West Coast. And obviously there aren't a whole lot of options, outside of UCLA, Stanford, Oregon, and Washington. Because it's not going to do you anything to, play UNLV or whoever. They tried that a couple of years ago.
Patrick Shaler really wants us to know that the Texas Longhorns would be a great pick.
Yeah, I mean, that's coming up. They're going to rotate on the schedule. It's going to be a home and home. That's one of the many that are.
I just don't think you can define a rivalry against them. It's just
right.
Like, and that's kind of what I thought more or less the question was posing. It's like, how do you establish a new regional rivalry?
Gotcha. Was that, did he say that about like renewing the rivalry? A regional rivalry. Yeah, I wouldn't want a regional though, unless the only one that I would want, the only 2 that I would want are the ones you said, Michigan and Ohio State. Outside of that, don't need anybody else in this part of the country. Again, like you're going to play Purdue a couple times. You're going to play Michigan State a couple times, but they don't need to be regulars on the schedule like USC was. You need that slot to get you out west. Notre Dame still has to find a way to get out west if USC goes off the schedule. So you've got to explore whatever options are out there, and like, I'm not sure what the benefit of like Arizona and Arizona State would be. But again, I've mentioned this a few times this week, like one of those kind of teams, or even a Colorado or Utah or whoever, playing a Shamrock Series game at SoFi Stadium against one of those kind of teams, like a team out west against Notre Dame. I think that's something that's, that could be an option as well. Patrick says Oregon Ducks. I mentioned them. Boise State. Yeah, I don't think you want to play Boise State on the regular, but obviously they're going to play them this year. But I don't think you want a long-term series with a group of 6 team, especially when it's only going to get you into Idaho. Like, it's not like Idaho is a fertile recruiting grounds. They need to be on the West Coast, as close to Los Angeles as possible. Christopher said Bella Ragone commits to the Irish. We actually talked about this yesterday and had it on the boards as well. She went full-blown, did the full-blown announcement today. She had posted on her TikTok profile yesterday that she was a Notre Dame commit, and so we talked about that yesterday. But that's a big recruit for Notre Dame women's basketball, to be able to get Bella Ragone, top 25-ish, top 25 player in the nation, and a wing player along the lines of, based on what I've seen of Ragone, like her frame, her game reminds me a lot of Sonia Citron. I don't know if she can play defense like Citron played, but from an offensive standpoint, I see some similarities there. You still on that side, Jess?
I'm still here.
In or out on the safeties having more interceptions than the cornerbacks for Notre Dame this year?
Out. I think that they have tremendous safeties. I think Leonard Moore is long and lanky. You're losing Xavier Watts. I still think Adon Schuler is going to have a great year. You're going to have a first-time starting safety on the other side of him. So I'm going to go with the experience. I think Christian Gray is going to be even better this season. I think he's got kind of a chip on his shoulders, and we all know what Leonard Moore can do. So I'm going to be out, and I'm going to go with the corners.
I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to be in. I like this.
Ooh.
I mean, like, there's only so much you're going to be able to do with those corners. You're going to have to kind of pick your poison out there. But I think that with Schuler and those other guys that they've got beside him, whether it's Stroman or whoever else it ends up being, I think that the safeties are going to have a pretty nice haul. They might not have, 6 like Watts had last year, but I think they'll still put up a pretty good number. So I'll go in on the safeties having more. Bootstrap Bill says, in or out, Sean will always introduce Vince as the Dean of Discipline. I'll go in on that.
In.
Totally in. Vince D'Addario, Dean of Discipline. 2, Dean of Discipline is just a fancy way of saying the fun police.
Also true.
That's what Vince is. When you think about it, he's the fun police. Totally
he's a get off my lawn guy at work and at home.
Yep. And becoming even more so at work than at home, I think. So, total buzzkill, man. Come on. ND Blitz, we in or we out? Notre Dame should play hardball with USC and tell them they will only play them the last week in November every year if they want to do a 1-year renewable contract.
Have to be in on this. If USC, you can't feel like you're letting USC dictate the terms and win. Notre Dame obviously wants to keep this game. Doesn't feel like USC wants to do the same, and so apply the pressure back. You're in charge in this situation.
You are in charge, but at the same time, I'm going to be out on this because you want to essentially make it known that you're willing to, if you're Notre Dame,
to do anything.
You want to make it known that you're doing anything and everything to make this happen And if it falls through, it's not your fault.
On them.
It's all on them. That's right. So hardball is not the way I would play.
All right. I've been talked off the ledge.
That's right.
Maybe that's what gets me in trouble. I play hardball.
You got to go the sugar, not the vinegar route. Catch more flies with honey, right? Isn't that the saying?
Yeah.
ND Blitz, we in or we out. Marcus Freeman would take Riley Leonard in a wrestling match. No doubt.
Huge
Total in. The only question is, how quickly would the pin come? How quickly would it happen?
I know probably Marcus Freeman has that killer instinct. I don't know if Riley Leonard would take it serious until he gets flexed one time. You know what I mean? Like, I just see Riley Leonard just kind of being happy, go,
Lincoln Riley. You're talking about the wrong Riley.
Then this is he would destroy Lincoln Riley. It wouldn't even be close.
Yeah, not Riley Leonard, Lincoln Riley. I'm pretty sure. I mean, he only said Riley, but this is. I mean, he went last name on Freeman, so I'm assuming
right.
That's
no,
last
this is
name
definitely
on Riley.
Lincoln Riley.
Yeah. So I think we're both totally in on this one.
Does that do it?
I think that's it. We've run the gamut of we in, we out. Good questions, though, tonight, I thought. So, Jesse, with that, you know what's coming next. Are you ready for rapid fire?
We got a lot on the list today, so
we do.
Let's get to it.
We added a big one this afternoon. A big one dropped.
Thanks, Vince, for adding more work.
College football playoff executives voted unanimously today to change the seeding for the playoffs for the upcoming 2025 season. Teams are going to be seeded directly by the rankings, 1 through 12, eliminating the concept that designated the top 4 seeds to the 4 highest-ranked conference champions like last year. This also means that, unlike last year, Notre Dame would be eligible to get a bye. So again, straight 1 through 12, Notre Dame now eligible to have a first-round playoff bye. Scale of 1 to 10, how much do you like it?
If I could give you 100, I would, but I will say 10 out of 10. And the reason why I'm so excited about this is, one, this was my biggest grievance with the playoff, last year with the 12-team format. I thought it was the silliest thing. And now you're actually ranking teams based off of pure merit and not just off of, winning potentially a conference championship. And, also I just feel like this, again, kind of kills the whole argument that a lot of people use of, well, Notre Dame's got to be in a conference if they're going to make it far into the playoff and have success in the playoff. It's like, well, last year they didn't, and they played a first-round game, and they went on to the national championship, And so now I just feel like it kills that conversation. And now Notre Dame, not only do they not have to play a conference championship, but they could also get a first-round bye. You know what I mean? So, think about that. A team, they could get 2 weeks off compared to a conference champ who would only get 1 week off because they'd have to play in the conference championship. And so not being in a conference and there being no reward for a conference championship is best case scenario for Notre Dame. So I have to be a 10 out of 10 in this.
Yeah. And I mean, the reason Notre Dame got left out of this initially was because of the fact, well, this was the concession. You're not in a conference. You don't have to play one of these conference championship games, even though no one's making any of these conferences play the conference championship games. They're doing it to themselves. Yeah, for the money maker, for the money grab, for TV and selling tickets and everything else. So if you looked at last year, Arizona State, Boise State, Oregon, and Georgia got the byes last year. If you did it with the system that's going to be in place this year, Oregon and Georgia both still would have gotten byes, but Texas and Penn State would have gotten byes as well. So you'd be looking at 2 SEC, 2 Big Ten teams would have gotten the byes. Notre Dame would have been the 5 seed and would have hosted Clemson in the first round instead of Indiana, because Clemson was ranked 16th last year. But because they won the ACC championship, that would have moved them up to the number 12 seed because they won their conference. So under this new format, if you win your conference championship, you still get an auto bid, but you're you're going to be ranked in a true seeding process. So I love it. This is 10 out of 10 for me. It's amazing that everyone looks at 1 year last year like Bernie. He says he hates it. I love the home game, builds momentum. And Marcus Freeman was never going to say that playing a game in the first round was a disadvantage versus having the bye, and he wasn't ever going to say vice versa. But the honesty of the situation is, if you ask any coach, you don't have to go out there and risk anyone getting hurt. You have, you have to play one less game to get to the championship. I think they're going to take it 10 out of 10 times, don't you?
Oh, 100%. It's, we kind of had this conversation yesterday. This all assumes that Notre Dame lands in the top 4. If not, they'll still get that home playoff game.
You still have to be in the top 4.
Right.
Exactly.
And so which probably means if you're Notre Dame, you have to go undefeated. And so if you're not undefeated, you're probably not a top 4 and you get to host one of those games. So I would say more times than not, Notre Dame is going to be hosting a game than they are getting that first round bye. And so when they do get that first round bye, it'll just be nice because, like you said, every coach is going to take 2 weeks off. If they get that, it will. Again, Notre Dame is going to be the only team to potentially get 2 weeks off now with no conference championship and a potential first round bye. So you're always going to take the time off, especially at the end of the season. You're banged up. There's a lot going on.
Look at the Jeremiah Love situation as an example. You've got a little bit longer to rest a guy like Jeremiah Love and anybody else who was banged up at the end of the season. Josh says, question is, could 3 weeks of rest be beneficial or hurtful? I think it all depends on how you use the time. Like how you go about preparing your team. There's obviously the
still
argument.
Have physical practices even though you're not playing another team.
Yeah, again, Bernie says all the bye teams lost. Well, could it be that maybe that's because Arizona State and Boise State had buys and they weren't one of the top 4 teams?
Right.
That's part of why the bye teams all lost.
How this goes.
Could it also be that Notre Dame was better than Georgia? Georgia would have had a bye either way. Could it have been that Notre Dame was better than Georgia, and so Notre Dame won that game? Again, you're using an extremely small sample size to generalize how you think all this is going to come out. And oh, by the way, this is only going to be for this year. There's a 12-team playoff this year. After this year, 2026 and beyond, it's going to expand. Whether it's 14 or 16, it's going to expand. So this is a 1-year deal that this is even going to be in place. Now, most likely, they'll go straight seeding, with whatever format they end up with, and they haven't decided, in terms of will teams get buys, how many teams will get buys, and all that kind of stuff. But did you watch the game, Bernie? He's saying, come on, the Irish had more talent than Georgia. They totally outplayed them. Georgia having a bye didn't lose them that game. Like Notre Dame won that game because they beat Georgia at the line of scrimmage, and also a coach with much less experience outcoached a coach with 2 national championships.
Yep.
It wasn't because they got a bye. That wasn't why Georgia lost. We're going to have to agree to disagree if otherwise, because it's just, there are plenty of, look at the NFL. The top seed always gets a bye. Now, does the top seed always get to the Super Bowl? No, but the top seed, unless you're the Dallas Cowboys, typically has a lot of success in the playoffs.
Very true.
All right, so let's shift gears a little bit. Notre Dame basketball great Pat Garrity was announced as Notre Dame's new men's and women's basketball general manager this week. Today, he was introduced at a press conference. Garrity's going to have 3 roles in his new position. He'll be the men's basketball sport administrator. He will also be the GM for both men's and women's basketball teams. So he was asked, how do you juggle all 3 of those things?
That's really good question, and I think the way this job is designed is maybe a little bit different than some schools have approached it. Some schools have approached this is solely like a personnel is the heavy focus of the job. So I think obviously if I were to sequence it, getting up to speed on the sports admin side is the most important because that's a lot of the operational stuff of the men's program right away. But I think the dealing with specifically like the commercial aspect of the person on the personnel side, I think it's, dealing with two teams is a lot, but I don't think it's anything too overwhelming where you're having the conversations with agents and parents and figuring out who's at risk of leaving and where you potentially need to shore up your roster, that kind of thing. So I think it's going to be a lot to learn. I think for me, though, like really getting up to speed on the sports admin side at the first, and then we have two coaches right now who have been running their programs experience for a long time. So I don't think there's any real urgency right away to come in and change anything that they're doing.
All right, so there's Pat Garrity, the new men's and women's basketball GM. What do you think about all that, Jess, juggling three roles?
So I have an initial thought, and I have a thought about the audio. Which one would you like first?
Give us a thought on the audio. Do the audio. Go ahead.
Okay. So the sport, I guess I'm a little bit confused by the vagueness around sports admin. Like what is there?
So this means he is the assistant athletic director.
Okay.
That is the administrator for men's basketball. So like Pete Bavacqua sits at the top of the athletic director chain, and then every sport has its own assistant/associate athletic director that is assigned to that team and handles, like all of the, sort of logistics and, like kind of like compliance and, all those different kind of issues for the sport.
Okay. So, I mean, that makes sense. A guy who hasn't been probably around college sports in a while,
right?
It's a different world. So, that checks the list. Okay. Sports admin. And then another thing he talked about was the commercial side of things. And so are we talking about like basically the selling of the product that is Notre Dame basketball?
That word kind of caught me as well, because like he was talking about it, I think in reference to NIL, because that's going to be one of the things in his role as the general manager. That's going to be one of his kind of chief duties is, and I think he kind of mentioned it in that specific cut where he'll be talking with the players, talking with the parents, talking with the agents as well. I don't think he necessarily went to the agents, but, that will be part of it as well, like working out the details of, because he has sat on the Notre Dame NIL board previously, so he's got experience with that. And so kind of working out NIL deals, whether it's, for roster retention for players who are currently on the roster, or when you're talking to a potential transfer type player to get that, like that will be a big part of his role in this general manager role, big part of his duties.
Gotcha. And I think, the last part I think is the most significant part, basically the liaison between the university, the parents, and the agents. Like
right.
That's his biggest job at the end of the day. And I think he hit it out of the park when he said, it's going to take that load off of Niele and Micah's shoulders. Like they might identify what players they want, but then it's on him to go out there and pursue and start the conversations between agents, players, all of that sort of thing. So that all makes sense. And I think that's the part he's got to be great at. And I think that's the part that he was ultimately, hired on to do is be a significant impact specifically on that relationship right there.
Yeah. And I mean, it seems like a lot when you're talking about doing all three. But at the same time, like when you look at, like, I think that Mike Martin, the football GM's duties are different in that part of his job, I think is sort of more identifying the actual talent. Whereas on the basketball side, it is more the coaches and their staff are still doing that when they're out going to the AAU tournaments and doing all those different things. But his part is more in the role of the traditional general manager, kind of like what you were talking about with being the liaison and being the one who's actually having those conversations about the money side and all that stuff. So you kind of take that away from the coach's plate, and there's not that, there's not nearly as much that's heaped on the coaches. Kind of speaking of which, I'll just kind of go to this right now because we got to talk with Niele, Ivey, and Micah Shrewsberry after the press conference as well. And Niele, Ivey talked about the biggest benefit to her in having someone in this position, the general manager?
I mean, just allowing us to coach, allowing us to be out of those conversations, allowing us to do what we're brought here to do. That's a different part of coaching that no coaches have experience with, and it allows him to run those conversations, helps with agents and recruiting, and allows us again to be able to do what we do, which is to coach.
I mean, kind of feels a little bit underrated, doesn't it? Like just letting the coach actually be able to coach and not have to do all these things that have just come up within the last 3 years or so.
Yeah, and this kind of, the last question I told you, I kind of had like an initial thought about the whole thing, and this question actually leads better into it. Do you think that there's maybe what's the hard way to put this, animosity from Micah and Niele, just the seasons that they came off of? Micah's in year 2, probably not as ahead of schedule as they would have liked to be. It was a tough year, especially at the end. He had not his meltdown, but he had his rant towards the end of the season. And then we all know how everything ended on the women's side with Olivia and Niele. So it's just like, do you think that there's any sort of feelings where, it's like,
hey,
both
if
teams
I could just
struggled.
Coach, yeah,
right.
If I could just coach, then I wouldn't have to deal with all this other stuff. Is that what you're saying?
The timing feels very nice considering everything that both of these programs just came off of this last season, is I guess what I'm saying. And so when you hear Niele talk about it and say, it allows me to just coach. And she literally said it like almost 5 times, just coach. It really feels pointed that at the end of the season, Niele might have just simply said, I'm overwhelmed, with coaching, with recruiting, with dealing with parents, with dealing with money, with dealing with the portal, with all of it. And now, a month and a half later, you get someone who's coming in and really taking a lot of that weight off your shoulders so you can do what you're really good at. That's right. Identifying talent and coaching at the end of the day.
Yeah, identifying talent, coaching, but also maintaining the relationship with the player so you don't, because like that word that Garrity used, being that liaison, that's basically, he's the buffer between the two. So Niele Ivey doesn't have to sit down, and I won't use names, but she doesn't have to sit down with player X and talk about, well, how much do you need in NIL?
And I bet that was probably a lot of the hard conversations at the end of the season was, Coach, we really love you and we trust you and you're great, but I can go get $1 million elsewhere.
Yeah.
And Niele's probably like, well, what do you want me to do? That's not really in my wheelhouse.
As a head basketball coach, you shouldn't have to be the one negotiating that kind of stuff. That's exactly right. And it feels like, based on everything that we heard from Garrity today and then talking with the two coaches afterwards, that's going to be just a huge part of it. And I've got another cut here from Garrity, he was asked about essentially, like, when it comes to Notre Dame, both with roster retention, NIL, and the transfer portal, like transfer portal specifically, there are it's still a little bit more restrictive when it comes to Notre Dame, like in terms of who can get in, like who's a fit, all those different kind of things. And so he talked about that aspect of his job.
And I actually look at it as an advantage in a couple of ways. And so, number one, if you're going to a school as a young player that is doing business in the transfer portal and winning with seniors, like every year you're worried about someone coming in and taking my job. Like when you're a team and a program like we have here, the word is development. Like, we're bringing in freshmen, we're developing them physically on the floor into roles where they know that they can grow and excel. Like, and that doesn't mean that the portal isn't going to be a part of it, but I think as we've seen, it's going to be more limited than a lot of other places. So I actually look at it as an advantage, because when you're having a conversation with a young player and their family about your plan to develop them into the player and where you think they can get, like, they can pretty much take that to the bank if they come in and put the work in to get there.
All right, Jesse, very attentive with your ear. Anything stand out to you there that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think the development word is the big one. And if you're, Notre Dame and you're trying to sell someone on the program, it's just kind of like what we talked about with Marcus Freeman a lot of the time. It's you sell them on everything else outside of the money. You sell them on Notre Dame, the education, and then most importantly, the development. I mean, when you look at Notre Dame men's basketball, harder of a sell. But when you look at Notre Dame women's basketball, look at the track record of WNBA players that come from Notre Dame. And you talk about development of, okay, you stay here, you take a quote unquote pay cut, but look at the long-term success or the long-term kind of benefits that come out of the whole Notre Dame experience. And so I like hearing that from him. And that's ultimately, what it's going to take is players who are committed to the development, not just the early upfront cash, but the development, because I think that's also what's going to make you work harder at the end of the day. And I think that's something that a lot of people haven't really talked about with the whole NIL thing is these kids are just getting money and then just, what incentive is there to work hard after that, right? Like you get money and it's like, all right, well, if it doesn't work, at least I got money, but it used to be like you don't have anything besides that opportunity to go pro. And so that's what you kind of have to identify if you're Notre Dame is players who aren't necessarily just in it for the next bag of cash, that are here to truly develop and become a NBA, WNBA player.
But to his point as well, Notre Dame is not, they're not going to live on one and done type guys. You might get, one of those guys every few years to come in if you're fortunate enough. And Micah Shrewsberry, because we're, one and done, we're still talking on the men's side, if he's capable of recruiting those guys and he's got, some big recruits coming in this summer who'll be a part of next year's team. But you still have to be able to develop. As he said, it's still a developmental program. Like look at Jaron Grant and Pat Connaughton as examples. Like those guys obviously stayed at Notre Dame for multiple years, helped Notre Dame have a lot of success, a couple of Elite Eights while they were here, but they were also on the developmental track. Just like Pat Garrity, when he came out of high school in the 90s and ultimately ended up having a nice NBA career. It was still about a developmental path. And again, like having someone in his position, I think is huge to just, take all this other stuff that's just come up in the last few years off these coaches' plate. So speaking of the NBA, final thought on this. Garrity played in the NBA. He was the Detroit Pistons assistant general manager for a few years. And Mike Shrewsberry talked about that, how that NBA experience can be helpful now here at Notre Dame.
Yeah, I think you take different parts from the NBA side and how does it kind of fit into what we do here. And like we talked about with the roster construction, with the salary cap, with all those things, you're trying to build your program in the best way possible. So I think all of our expertise is good, but ours was on the coaching side. His was on the front office side. So now being able to combine those two things, I think will be great for all of us.
And it just feels to me like college sports is mirroring the pro model more and more. How important do you think having that pro background is in this position?
So first of all, I don't know why, but every time I listen to Micah Shrewsberry, I never think that is Micah Shrewsberry. His voice just does not match up. But anyways, I think it's a huge deal because, in terms of having true raw experience at the highest level is more relevant and important than even doing this at the college level because they're the pros. And so I think naturally they're going to do things better. And you could say, okay, well, like look at the Detroit Pistons success and all that stuff. They just kind of got good here in the last couple of years, but it's still the ability to be around it, to absorb it, and good or bad, you're still picking up things that you would or wouldn't do. And now you can translate that into college.
Right. And there's still the business side of it, which it really feels like this position is really going to, have a lot of a focus on, that business side of it that you pick up in the NBA, because like they don't have salary caps right now in college, but the revenue sharing is supposed to be coming, you know, like all this different stuff is supposed to be coming. So, you know, like, again, when you're talking about putting your roster together and you've got all these different players and agents and families with their hands out, like you have to be able to put all that together and figure out how the pieces fit, not just now, but in the future as well. And that's what you know, like that's what you have at the pro level. Like he's already, as an assistant general manager, dealt with a lot of that stuff. And obviously scouting and all that, you know, stuff comes into it as well. And, you know, it really feels like a good fit, because something else that they talked about, both the coaches and I think Pete Bavacqua, is the ability, you know, to be able to show to the players that you're recruiting, you know, like some of the great players you've had in the past. And Pat Garrity is one of those players. And, you know, Troy Murphy, you know, who came along, you know, right after that. I think, you know, they overlap by a little bit, you know, but like those kind of players, Connaughton, Grant, you know, all those different guys. And obviously the women's side, you know, already has, you know, like they bring their players back fairly regularly, but, you know, they talked about having a guy like Garrity who can keep some of those past players involved and helping to impact, you know, what they're doing with the program right now. I think that's all going to be pretty important for Notre Dame, pretty big for Notre Dame to have someone in that position.
About to lose my mind in this house.
Did you feed him? Did you feed him before you started?
Mr. Home Improvement guy is back right now, banging on the house.
Ah, gotcha. Fill in the blank. Notre Dame great Jerome Bettis is going into the Cotton Bowl Hall of Fame on Friday. When you think of Bettis, the first thing you think of is blank.
The first thing I think of is his nickname, the Bus, and obviously a guy who, you know, in my opinion, he kind of changed what you thought of a running back. You think of quick, you know, dynamic, flashy guys. Jerome Bettis was a very physical, run over you type running back, right? And so that's the first thing that I think of when I think of Jerome Bettis, is just how physically imposing he was, and it's like, you know, it's kind of like, you know, like the white man can't jump. It's kind of like, you know, the big man could be the running back. Basically, he proved that a big man, and he's not, you know, big as by comparison, but like you just didn't see someone like him play running back, and I think he kind of it redefines the position a little bit.
It's kind of crazy when you think about his career, because the first thing I think of is the Sugar Bowl against Florida, Steve Spurrier's Florida Gators. This was well before you were born. This was like the 91 season, the 92
This is why it's
Sugar
tough,
Bowl.
because I didn't get to actually see him play.
You see, I was thinking you did. I was thinking that you got to see at least some of him when he was still, you know, kind of like toward the tail end of his career with the Pittsburgh Steelers. You don't remember any? You're still too young to remember that?
I just don't remember much of it.
Okay. Because that's what I like. The first thing that comes to mind to me is just those big gashing runs that he had against Florida in that Sugar Bowl when Notre Dame was an underdog and Lou Holtz was talking about, what was it, Cheerios or Notre Dame, which one belonged in the bowl and all that kind of stuff. And Jerome Bettis was just the poster child for running over the Gators that day. They wore the white jerseys with the green numbers. And, you know, like it was just the Jerome Bettis show against Florida as Notre Dame rolling over. So that's the first thing that I think of. It's hard for me to think of him in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform because of the, you know, the history, my, you know, like my tortured youthful history with the Pittsburgh Steelers in a couple of Super Bowls. Sly Fox says Penn State Snow Bowl, another good one. Reggie Brooks with a big touchdown in that game as well. Washington Commanders Foundation Chairman Marjorie Harris said this week, the Commanders are America's team when talking with the media. Meanwhile, after NFL voters after NFL owners voted to keep the Tush Push, the Eagles posted a game photo of them playing against the Green Bay Packers with a caption that said "Push on" social media. Which is the bigger shot fired?
So I have to go with the Eagles and their push on post with the Packers in the background. The Commanders thing is whatever. Everyone nowadays just takes their claim of this is America's team and we're America's team and yada yada yada. So that's
not even the Beltway's team. Come on, give me a break.
Yeah, you had one good year, and all of a sudden you're America's team because you had a good year. You know, you made it to the playoffs. You won a playoff game. Whatever. I think that the other one is more of a shot fired because I believe for 2 years in a row now, the Eagles have eliminated the Packers from the playoff, and the Packers were the biggest crybabies about this tush push rule. And
they're the ones who introduced. They're the ones who proposed the change. That's right.
I don't know if you saw this, but the final vote was 22-10, and that was the final score of the Eagles and the Packers when they played in the playoffs.
Ooh, no, I didn't realize that.
And so I just think it just all lines up to be, it's just the Packers are crying and they didn't get their way, and I don't mind the Eagles just basically saying, "Hey, you tried, but it failed." So I don't know. I don't think you could go wrong with either, but I enjoyed the Eagles' pettiness because the Packers are only crying about it because they can't beat them in the playoffs.
That's what it comes down to, and it's definitely it's the bigger shot to me is the Eagles, pushing on right back at the Packers. The Packers are being soft babies. Lincoln Riley might as well be coaching them right now. Like the whole. Everyone wants to be America's team, and everyone wants to throw it out there like they're America's team. And I get it. Like there's like a lot of people who hate the Cowboys and they're tired of the Cowboys being referred to as America's team. But look at the ratings every year, and that's why they're America's team, because they still have more interest than anybody else. Even when they're bad, there's still more interest than anybody else. That's why they're America's team. And, who just said it? Craig, does anybody even like the Commanders? Like, no. No. By the way, I saw something yesterday. I sent you the tweet. I don't know if you actually watched it. The Commanders actually, remember in the playoffs when they played against the Eagles and they kept jumping off sides at the goal line and there was all that stuff going on? Mm-hmm. Well, the Commanders may have figured out a way to actually stop the tush push. And that is you have your defensive end come off the end unblocked, and you don't actually go for the ball carrier. You actually try to take to the ground.
Oh, the push man
behind him. Like you tackle, you get guys to come off the edge, and you try to get the push man in the backfield before they can get a really good push, because that's how this thing is so successful. It's not the initial surge. It's the push in the backfield after it looks like the play is stopped and it keeps going. So we'll see if someone tries to replicate that and is able to actually slow it down this year. Won't be the Packers, though.
If you ask everyone, it's just because Jalen Hurts can squat 600 pounds.
Yes, of course. Fill in the blank. Tyrese Halliburton during Reggie Miller's choke gesture after his last second shot sent the Pacers and Knicks to overtime in Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals was blank.
Absolutely fitting. There was no better and Reggie Miller was on the call of all things. I don't know. I want to share my screen real quick on this photo.
Okay.
Of Reggie Miller last night. I'm not sure.
I think I saw. I've probably seen this because is it the one where they're pointing at each other? There it is.
That right there is when you've done it. It's like the Spider-Man meme where they're pointing at each other. It was just, you couldn't have asked for a more electric fitting moment where Reggie Miller's there, you're down 11 with 50 seconds left, and you somehow come back and win that game. It was just, there was nothing else that could have been done or said in the moment that would have been better. That was the best way to end that game. And what Halliburton has been doing late in these games to the Cavs, what he did in the first round to Giannis and the Bucks, he's just been on a tear. And so he had every right Reggie Miller was on the call, and it was just the perfect moment, in my opinion.
Big hat tip. I mean, huge hat tip. Craig said, what a shot. I mean, that thing clanked off the back iron, shot how many feet up in the air, and then comes down. It was nuts that it even went. And then it looks like it's a 3, and it turns out his toes on the line. So it was a 2, and they go to overtime instead. Before last night, teams had gone 0 and 1,414 in games when trailing by 9+ points in the last minute of regulation or overtime. The Pacers are down by 14 with less than 3 minutes to go last night. They were down by 9 in the last minute and somehow managed to win. It was just,
You want to know
insane.
confession?
So very, very fitting, pretty cool tribute with Reggie sitting right there that Halliburton did that.
I stopped watching in the fourth quarter. I had to go back and watch the rest of the game this morning because
I will
just
not
didn't
deny that I
believe it.
fell asleep last night.
I had to go back and watch all of the fourth quarter and overtime this morning. I got done working out early this morning. I was like, oh, you know what? I got a little bit of time here. And so I pulled up the highlights and I watched it on YouTube. But I mean, what really this game, like, yes, Halliburton did his thing and got the final shot, but this has to be known as the Aaron Nesmith game. The amount of threes that he just kept.
He's the one who actually did the Reggie
did a lot
Miller
of the
impersonation. Yeah. It's just that Halliburton got the, like the highlight shot of the night. But it was Nesmith that was actually, because it was Reggie who was cranking in all those shots in the original choke game. Yeah, you're right.
It's just really funny though, because like say what you want about the NBA. I just thought that these first couple of games have been tremendous. And if you can truly watch these games and say that the NBA is so much worse than what it was X amount of years ago, I just have a hard time believing it because there's just so many more skilled players in the league this day, in my opinion. Everyone can make a freaking shot, and it just last night they were just burying shot after shot.
And people call the Knicks the Villanova Knicks because of the 3 guys who played for Villanova, obviously. But when you watch their style of game, one, I've told you I love watching Jalen Brunson play. One because of his style, and it's just it's kind of fun seeing really the smallest guy on the court who at times doesn't even look like he should be out there, just carving up these big guys left and right. But the way he drives and kicks and they move the ball and they share the ball, it's not like a lot of other NBA teams that you see. And then when you look at the Pacers style of play, that pace, man, they just keep running.
They run
and run and run.
And run.
And it's just, again, it's so different. Are you pulling for either one of these teams after the Pacers knocked your pseudo Cavs out of the playoffs?
I'm actually a very low-key Knicks fan, and I'm a low-key Knicks fan because of you, actually. I'm a huge fan of Brunson. I thought he should have been on the Olympic team last year, to be honest with you. But yeah, I'm a low-key Knicks fan. I have a question to ask you. Have you ever seen – is his name Rick Carlisle? Have you ever seen the Pacers coach happy when he's on the court?
No.
He always has this –
I know.
No matter what, the entire game, there is no fluctuating, just the whole time.
I think Halliburton was on McAfee last week, and he was talking about how his job is to try to make Rick Carlisle laugh once a game, just to try to keep him a little bit loose. He tries.
That makes sense.
That's right. One last question for you on somewhat the same subject. Fill in the blank. It's blank that with the Knicks, Pacers, T-Wolves, and Thunder all in the NBA's conference finals, it means the NBA is going to have a 7th champion in as many years when the winner is ultimately crowned. It'll be the first time that has ever happened in NBA history.
It's fishy. And the reason why it's fishy, and I'm gonna have fun with this, so just get on board. But there's conspiracies going around right now. I don't know if you heard about Shaq this week talking about, when he got drafted, they approached him and he said that Howard Stern said, "Would you rather be cold? Or would you rather be warm?" And Shaq said warm, and look where he ended up, the Orlando, right? And so, and now here we go. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna play into it. And then there's the, Cooper Flag this year. How did the freaking Mavs end up with Cooper Flag after just trading away a generational Luka Doncic, right? So like all these things. And then now we're talking about how, the NBA for their ratings, they want different MVPs because we haven't had back-to-back MVPs in a long time. And now we don't have back-to-back champions. So you're trying to get new MVPs. You're trying to get new championships. I think it's great. I don't think the game is rigged. I
don't think the NBA is chomping at the bit for the possibility of an Indiana Pacers Oklahoma City Thunder finals. Like you talk about,
Right.
You talk about dust in your ratings, man. I think it's a league that is like. I realize the NBA and conspiracy theories go hand in hand,
right?
But at the same time, like. It really kind of feels like they have figured out, I'm drawing a blank on what I was going to say, actually. Parity. They figured out parity, basically. But when you've got that many, because, like, look at the West. I mean, the Golden State Warriors were just running the West, it seemed like, forever. And now all of a sudden you've got all these great teams coming out of the West and different teams representing the West in any given year. Like you had a freaking Phoenix Milwaukee NBA finals just a few years ago.
Last year you had Boston and freaking the Timberwolves, right? So it's like, I know Boston's a more household name, but the Timberwolves, and now they're again in the Final Four. I think the NBA has, like you said, find a good way of like, there's really no dynasties in the sport anymore. Yeah. And it's really a year by year kind of basis. And it's crazy because I think that's why there's so much fluctuation in the coaching carousel as well. You got guys who win world championships and then like a year or two later they're getting kicked out the door. Like I just don't think that you would see that in really any other sport.
Yeah. So Tommy missed part of the question apparently because of the fact that the Knicks, Pacers, T-Wolves, and Thunder are all in the conference finals this year. It means that the NBA will have a 7th champion in 7 seasons when this season is over because none of those have won.
None of these 4 teams have won a championship in a long time.
Right. So you're guaranteed to have a 7th champion in 7 seasons. And like you look at the other, like the other leagues, and it doesn't happen very often. What are you laughing at?
The NBA lottery is obviously rigged. They don't even hide it. I just wanted to get the people going. I knew I would light that fire, baby.
I do find it curious that they don't even bother to roll out like the ping pong balls anymore and do the lottery with everybody watching. Like they just announce what happened in the lottery. Do you remember? It wasn't that long ago, was it? Do you remember when they used to do like the like the ping pong balls and stuff?
I think it makes it seem more legit. I think it gets you away from that conspiracy talk.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right, well, that's going to do it for tonight. Appreciate you being here. And
Tommy figured it out. We can all go home now.
Yep, that's right. A lot of good stuff in the We In, We Out tonight. Hit the like button before you leave. DK says the NHL lottery is rigged. So apparently every lottery is rigged. So the NFL should just go to a lottery so everyone can use
I'm definitely in on the NHL lottery being rigged because 2 years ago there was it was the Columbus Blue Jackets and basically the Chicago, and the Blue Jackets had a way better chance of getting the number 1 overall pick. And the Chicago hasn't been good in a while, and then all of a sudden they just get revitalized by this number 1 pick. So I'm in on that, and I can share that I actually know a little bit of NHL knowledge.
There you go. More than me. All right. Hit the like button before you go, and we will talk to you tomorrow on Ivey Nation Sports Talk.